But they had Reggie Walters was the musical director, but the most important one, I think, was the boy you mentioned. And I say boy because he was a young fellow then, Eric Abercrombie. I guess he was he ran the choir, and he really ran the choir like an administrator. I remember one time Reggie Walters, who was the backbone of the choir, was the arranger and everything else. He used to be late for the bus, and Eric told him, "If you're late again, we're going to leave it without you." And we did. And Reggie was never late again.
Broke him of that, didn't
Yeah. And I know one time we were making a record, and one of the guys who was going to sing a solo was late, and Eric didn't let him sing the solo. But he did that so the thing would work like it did. It was incredible.
Well, in addition to being a great musical group, it became really, for students, a significant leadership opportunity, leadership laboratory.
But the music was great. I mean, and we were very successful with the music. I know one year we sold enough copies of our first record we made to take the choir and all of its members and my wife and children and myself to Florida for a week.
Yeah, We've Come This Far by Faith.
That's the name.
Was the name of that album.
Yeah, they were great, and I think they were also social and political leaders on the campus, and this was a very important time. I think I've always thought, and I don't know why I'm saying this because I hadn't planned on it, but I always thought that the reason that Dr. Martin had me to be the first ombudsman, he thought there would be maybe racial problems on the campus, and that it would be good for me to be the ombudsman because of my relationship with the Omega Sci-Fi and also the University Ensemble. It so happened that our big problems came with the Vietnam War, not the racial problems. But I think one reason we didn't have it is that we had strong leadership from not only black leaders who were athletes like Aaron Marsh, for instance, but people like Bobby Trumbo and Eric Abercrombie and guys like that who were involved in the University Ensemble.
You know, we've got, I think we talk a lot about around here about the Essential Eastern, and the Essential Eastern, that experience in that grill, that bit you, and that's what kept you here. But we do on this campus each year a climate survey that's aimed at taking the temperature about diversity and issues related to diversity on this campus. And the results of that survey for years and increasingly show a very healthy climate on this campus in all areas dealing with diversity. And I like to think that the roots for that were built these many years ago that we're talking about. We just got some very good news last week from the Education Trust in Washington. Eastern is among the leaders in the country, one of the top 25 institutions, and I think we were like 5th in this in terms of the proportion of our African American students who graduate.
That's great.
And that was, that was wonderful. And in terms of, they're into looking at achievement gaps these days. How do your minority students graduate compared to your majority students? And in the top 20, we were 2nd in that categorization. So that's something that in which we take a lot of pride, and I think you're one of the folks that laid the groundwork for the kind of atmosphere that we have on this campus today. But you mentioned Bob Martin, and I'm looking at a picture on the wall behind you with Dr. Martin in it, and you knew him as a faculty member. I knew him as a student, and then from '68 when I came back from the Army until '76 when he retired. But Dr. Martin was a very complex
He
individual.
Really was. And the longer I've lived, the more impressed I've been with my memory of him. He played people like a fiddle. He played me like a fiddle. He used me, but he used me the way he should have used me, I would assume. I always thought that he was a great... Eric Abercrombie and I have talked about this in recent years. And the reason I mention Eric Abercrombie again, he and I have remained friends for a long time. In fact, you know that he and his wife have actually started a scholarship at Eastern for African-American students in my name and my wife's name. But Eric and I talked about it a lot. We always thought that Dr. Martin wasn't treating us well, but I think he used us because he was really supporting the black students on the campus, and he knew he just couldn't look like he was bending over backwards to do it because he would irritate other people.
And I've said this to other guests on this too. Bob Martin's probably the most, not probably, clearly the most politically astute person I've ever had the opportunity to observe. But he always, he had a single-mindedness about him. Eastern. And you know, he and Ann had no children. You know, the people at this institution were their children. Yeah. And just you said it, Eastern was, and the advancement of this institution just consumed the man. And I think I don't think he ever took a step that he didn't think wasn't in the best interest of Eastern. But when I think about the way he operated, the current environment with the Council on Public and Secondary Education, and I don't say that pejoratively, the CPE is a good organization, but the way we have to operate and the political and the hoops that we have to jump through today would have driven Bob Martin crazy.
You know, it's no secret that he and I had a history of clashing, but I don't think the clashes were ever as real as they appeared to other people. We had a number of clashes and this sort of thing, and it was over fraternities and this, that, but never any Eastern. We always agreed about Eastern. But he paid me, I think, the best compliment I've ever been paid in my life. And I don't know if you're interested in this kind of stuff.
Sure we are.
It was after he retired, and I came home from school one day. He also did me some things at other times that weren't so just nice. But Marion said, "You had a funny call today." She said, "You had a call from Mrs. Martin." She said, "Dr. Martin wants you to come by and see him tonight at 6:30 at his house up on Summit." And I said, "Well, what's he want to see me now?" I thought we were finished when he retired. And she said, "Well, she said that he would really like for you to come up there to see him." So I went up there and knocked on the door, and Mrs. Martin let me in, and we went over there and sat, and he said, "I don't know if you heard or not, Bill," he said, "but I'm thinking about running for state senator." He said, "What do you think of that?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean, what do I think of it? What does it matter what I think?" He says, "Oh, no," he says, "I want to know what you think. Do you think it's a good idea?" And he said, "You know, I could have asked a lot of people at Eastern," he said, "but they all would have said what they thought I wanted them to say." And he said, "You never have yet said what I wanted you to say."